I'm Josh Gernick for MyPoint TV in Austin, Texas on famous 6th Street, where for the first time in a while, it sounds like 6th Street. For better or for worse, Texas is opening back up after shutting down during the COVID-19 pandemic, which opens up the question of why? Why is Texas able to look like this while states like New York and Washington are still under lock and key? Politics aside, the one thing I learned is it's complicated.
It's rather interesting how much we don't know at this point.
That's how my conversation with Dr. John Carlo of the Texas Medical Association COVID-19 Task Force began. He did have some ideas, though, on why the second largest state by population has less positive COVID tests than states like Massachusetts. That state has a quarter of the people we do and thousands more infected. One theory, depending on where you live, 6 feet might not be possible.
New York, for example, has public mass transportation, subways, trains, things like that we just don't really have here in Texas. With our wide open spaces, and a lot of rural communities do have a lot of things going for us.
Science does show sunlight, heat, and humidity slow down and kill COVID. Texas is already baking. But Carlo throws water on that theory, as transmission usually happens in the air-conditioned indoors.
We've seen cases of coronavirus in very, very hot parts of the world already. So, in hot climates, it hasn't really slowed it down and hasn't really stopped it.
What did make a difference here, says Carlo, was Texans stepped up early.
Likely even before we started shuttering businesses and closing things and closing schools, we all as people and individuals were taking our own precautions.
Washing hands, social distancing, Carlo says we were early adopters and it shows. But before we get ahead of ourselves, with a patchwork amount of testing from state to state, it's hard to compare apples to oranges. Carlo says a fairer way to assess could be the percentage of tests which come back positive, but that's skewed by who the state is testing and where.
Think about it like this. If we had 100 tests in the past, well, we were using those tests for people that were showing really, really severe signs and symptoms of illness. As we've expanded the amount of tests available, more people are getting the tests, and more people that don't have any signs or symptoms or have less severe illnesses are getting tested. So what we would really expect is the testing percentage to go way, way down very, very quickly. They're starting to test in nursing homes, and we're just seeing a report that 1 out of every 3 tests now that are positive are actually in asymptomatic individuals in nursing homes.
Beyond all the guessing as to why Texas is the way it is, the decision to open up while a threat exists is controversial. Some state Democrats believe the right action is increased testing for vulnerable groups and continuing to financially help those out of a job, even if they want to go back to work.
I'm worried that Governor Abbott is more concerned about what his far-right political base thinks about reopening than he is what scientists and doctors and public health officials advise. If this virus is still out there, there isn't a vaccine, we don't have herd immunity. I wish they could open up tomorrow too, and I wish there wasn't a pandemic happening, and I wish there wasn't a deadly virus that was threatening our most vulnerable neighbors. But if we believe in people's right to life, we have to be able to make sacrifices.
But in order to give money, the state's coffers need to have money. Just look at the price of the pump to see the pain of the oil and gas industry, a Texas staple. Texas does have billions in the rainy day fund and stable tax revenue streams, but one think tank says we need to act now before the economic damage is extreme.
This is fairly unprecedented in modern history when you look at such a gigantic economic downturn in such a short period of time. You can't keep on operating this way and expect to not have huge cuts in state services along with potential pressure to increase taxes.
Suicide, domestic violence, drug abuse, all consequences of a stopped economy, say experts. Elected officials closest to their constituents, like Austin City Council member Ann Kitchen, say the questions they field show people are living in a state of limbo.
People are uncertain about the future. There's some anxiety about their personal circumstances and about the future, and some fear about what the future brings.
My main concern would be for my parents and grandparents and people like that, but they've stayed inside even now during this time. So I think if you're cautious and really nervous about it, you can make sure you're washing your hands, staying in, and doing what you need to do. I think Texas is absolutely doing the right thing.
I personally think they're opening too soon. I was tested for working with a co-worker, tested positive, and I don't know the results were accurate. So it's kind of scarce, you know. I think this thing is going to boom.
For better or for worse, Texas is opening up. The question is, while it gets better, could it set us up to get worse? Carlos says he expects a simmering of new cases in the coming months, but no huge spikes as restrictions loosen more and more. What he does say we need to prepare for is the long haul, that we could be living in a world of COVID-19 for the next 2 years until we get a vaccine that works and is available to enough people. I'm Josh Gurnick for MyPoint TV, and that's the way I see it.